Man, what a game. Hello everyone, I'm Keenan47, aka Wolfkeen, and welcome back to another edition of Wolfkeen's Thoughts. Today on Wolfkeen's Thoughts, well, as we no doubt know, Monster Hunter Rise is on the horizon, with it coming out in March, and me being a huge Monster Hunter fan, I kinda want to do a retrospective series on Monster Hunter World. Now, this is only going to be a two-part video series where I talk about my thoughts and feelings on World and then Iceborne, and I also give my thoughts on each and every monster that was added into the game, whether they're new or not. And so we're going to be starting part 1 with World. Now, if you remember my reaction of Monster Hunter World back at the E3 stuff, you would know I was heavily excited for Monster Hunter World. I was so excited to see an HD Monster Hunter coming to the PlayStation, the Xbox, the PC, after not really enjoying Monster Hunter Generations all that much, and after playing games like Monster Hunter 3 and then 4 Ultimate. World looked like it was going to be the next big one for me, and I was not disappointed after putting almost 1,000 hours into World. Like, the hype, the lead up, and everything leading up to World. Hell, I even got some of my best friends to join in, like Cole, Dean, Ryan, and many others. World was such a great game for me, and I'm so glad I got to experience it both at launch and with all its post-release content, as well as enjoying it with my friends. Obviously, World wasn't perfect. Its post-game left a lot to be desired, I will not deny that. And if you were someone who enjoyed classic Monster Hunter, World felt like a big departure from that, which I know many people were like that. Many people did not like World because they felt that the departure from classic Monster Hunter to some of the ideas that they have in mind for this game turned people away, especially the weapon and armor designs. I know that in particular was a point of contention for the longest time. But nonetheless, World ended up becoming really successful to the point that it got a lot of new people into it and turned Monster Hunter into Capcom's biggest selling game series of all time, which that's impressive considering that Monster Hunter used to be a very niche franchise. Now it's basically become like Yakuza 0, where Yakuza 0 is responsible for turning into the Yakuza series in the mainstream. So honestly, we owe a lot to Monster Hunter World for what it offered, not just in terms of quality of life, but also the amount of stuff that it added, as well as, well, bringing a whole new variety of new hunters and otherwise into the game. Now, there's not really much I need to say in terms of anything else besides post-game content, but that's going to lead into my next topic, talking about every single monster, both in the vanilla and the post-game of World. I'm going to save those and my thoughts for Iceborne in the second part of the video, which, you'll probably see a link in the description or a card when it's ready. Anyways, let's get started with each and every monster. First off with Great Jagras. Great Jagras is, in my opinion, a really good beginner monster. When I first played Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate, the first starter monster was the Great Jaggy, and the Great Jaggy actually works really well as a starter monster. Not too difficult, has plenty of telegraphed moves, and its gear is actually pretty good, though 3 Ultimate, Jesus Christ, the Jaggy armor was overpowered. Here with the Great Jagras, it's a great starting set, and it actually leads to one of the best great swords in the game, but I'm mostly talking about the monsters themselves and not really the armor and shit like that. Great Jagras is a great starting monster, and a great way to get people into the whole idea of fighting the bigger monsters. Then you have Kulu Yaku, which, I'll be honest, I love his dopey design and otherwise, even despite the fact I'm not the biggest fan of bird wyverns. However, the biggest problem with Kulu Yaku is that he's very gimmicky, like all he does is pick up a rocket and slam it on you like if he's freaking Michael Jordan. But even then, I don't think he's that bad of a monster, he's just kinda average when you really ask me. Then you got Puke Puke, which is Cole's favorite monster, and I like the design of Puke Puke, and I especially love its gimmick. It's a really dopey looking monster, kind of like the Kulu Yaku, only this one spews poison at you, has like a large tongue that he can use to smack you around and shit like that, and he's an interesting fight. Not to mention the gear that you get from Puke Puke is really nice too. Like I said, I'm not going to take gear into account, I'm just mostly talking about how I felt about fighting each and every monster. But Puke Puke was a fun fight. Bearoff is actually a returning monster, and one that I quite like a lot, because I remember fighting this guy from 3 Ultimate, and as well as fighting him in 4 Ultimate, if I'm not mistaken, if he's in there, I could be wrong. But Bearoff is a very fun fight. He covers himself in mud, so you have to try to break that mud off of him so you can deal full damage. which means that you can't just go in there with one elemental type of weapon. Like, if you go in there with fire, you're going to have a hard time with the mud. But once the mud's off, then the fire will do well. And he can cover himself with more mud, charge you, like, charge at you like a freaking battering ram and stuff like that. He's basic, but he's fun. Then there's Gyrototis. Gyrototis is honestly my least favorite monster in terms of the beginning monsters and stuff like that. Or at least in World Vanilla, to be honest, because the problem with Gyrototis is that he's boring. He has the same gimmick as Bearoff, which is covering itself in mud, so you have to break that off. But since he's only relegated to one location in the entire game, unlike Bearoff, which can walk around the area, and not to mention Gyrototis' attacks aren't all that interesting or otherwise, it's a very boring fight, and it's not even that difficult either. I think Gyrototis is my least favorite monster in the world, to be honest. Now we have Tobai Kadachi, which I quite like this guy. What an interesting design to go with, like, sort of like a viper squirrel or something like that, where it can just jump around the area, fly around like a flying squirrel, smack you with its electricity. This guy really does teach you how dangerous status ailments like shock and stuff like that can be. Since, like, if you get shocked and then you get hit again, you have a higher chance of being stunned, and being stunned is a dangerous thing you don't want to deal with. Tobai Kadachi is actually quite a lot of fun to fight. I love its design and otherwise, and hey, it actually does get you into the idea of status ailments and why you should be carrying null berries on you. Puke Puke kind of does the same thing as well, but that one you need to be carrying antidotes, and there's less enemies that make you carry antidotes than there are enemies that make you carry null berries. Now we move on to Anjana, which is my favorite monster in the world. Anjana is my favorite monster because when Anjana was first revealed, oh my god, I remember the community was like, this just looks like a generic T-Rex. This doesn't look interesting in any kind of way. They've lost their touch. And then once you actually start fighting Anjana, it's like, nope, not even close. Not even fucking close, people. It was great. Like, Anjana turns into, like, this weird sort of thing that has, like, a bone on the, like, the bone nose exposes. These weird sorts of wings on its back when it gets enraged. It can also spew fire at you, and even doing this fire attack that could cart you in one hit if you aren't careful. Anjana really does feel like one of the first walls when you first play World, and he's deceptively, deceptive in his design. It's like he looks like a generic T-Rex, but the moment that you take him lightly, he's gonna char you to a goddamn crisp. I love him. He's my favorite monster in the world. Now we've got Wrathion. Wrathion is, well, a returning monster, but to be perfectly honest, I don't think Wrathion is all that interesting when compared to Raffles. Wrathion is just a dragon that will just run at you over and over again and can poison you. Wrathion's very generic in its design and its attacks, but it's one of the first few dragons that you actually fight in Monster Hunter, at least in this game. There are plenty of others in other games like 3 and 4 and even Generations, especially when you got things like Vaustrex being a thing. But Wrathion is iconic for a reason, same thing with Raffles, so it being in the game makes a lot of sense. Then there is Sisyaku. I'm not a fan of this one either. Sisyaku is interesting in terms of a gimmick where the sort of things on its head can flash you and cause you to get stunned. But the problem is that once those break, it's nothing more than a gimped bird wyvern. At least the Kulu Yaku can just pick up another rock when it loses its rock or whatever and keep hitting you with it. Once Sisyaku loses its gimmick, it's nothing more than just a bird with nothing. Like, not a very fun fight, and not to mention very dumb. Like, because it could just keep flashing you to stun you and otherwise, but there are very easy ways to counter that, so not a good fight. Now we have Palumu. Palumu is new and honestly very interesting. Like, able to puff up its entire body, almost like one of those dandelions that fly around in the area. Not to mention being able to use the wind to either, like, knock you off your feet and otherwise causing, like, miniature tornadoes, or just breathing in air causing you to lose your footing and shit like that. And not to mention, it just looks and sounds really unique. It's a bat that's basically combined with a dandelion. I had a former friend who loved this monster. She swore this was her favorite monster in the entire game, and I could see why. But, I think it's a fun fight. I think Palumu is an interesting new monster, and I would love to see it more. Great Gyros, on the other hand, I hope we never see again, because Jesus Christ, Great Gyros is Great Gyros appears near the end of low rank, and it doesn't feel like it belongs there. Great Gyros is less, like, what's the right way for me to say it? Great Gyros is easier than Great Jagras. That's a problem right there in and of itself. Great Gyros can cause paralysis. Okay, but that's not really anything too dangerous. Great Gyros barely has any attacks and shit like that. Like, the only thing Great Gyros has is that it can summon more of the smaller Gyroses to fight for it, but other than that, it's boring. It shouldn't be near the end game of low rank. Fucking no. Then we have Rattlebond. Rattlebond, oh my god, what a great monster. I love Rattlebond's design because it's basically a different version of the Erdogan, which we'll get to later. Rattlebond is a really fun monster to be fighting against, and honestly speaking, I love the fact that you can knock it over, mine its bones, the bones you could break, which takes away its armor and allows you to deal full damage and stuff like that. Learning how to fight Rattlebond and how to get rid of its bones is one of the more, like, interesting ideas. And not to mention, you learn very quickly with Rattlebond that certain weapons have a better chance than others. So, like, for example, if you're someone like me who used the, like, bow gun, you'll know that normal shots aren't really great against Rattlebond, but pierce shots and explosive shots would be perfect against Rattlebond. Then you have people who are blade masters, where maybe using a greatsword isn't the best idea unless you're doing certain moves, and maybe you're better off using a hammer. This guy really does teach you how using different weapons, ammo types, and otherwise can actually help you in the long run, so you don't just get stuck in, you know, one way or another. Then we have Legianna. Legianna I actually quite like as a fight and is an interesting design. It's able to use ice and otherwise, which of course you have to deal with Ice Blight now. And it's able to fly around. Not to mention it actually turf wars with certain monsters. That's another thing I forgot to bring up. Many of the turf wars with some of these monsters are incredible. Giratodas with Bearoff, freaking Palumu with Legianna, Rattlebond with the next monster I'll be talking about. All the turf wars in this game were amazing, and I'm glad that they're staying with Rise. But going back to Legianna, it's an interesting monster because it's supposed to be the apex monster of the Coral Highlands, and it feels like it. It feels like the kind of monster you wouldn't want to deal with. Basically, Legianna is to the Coral Highlands as what Raffles is to the Ancient Forest, and that's a very apt description for Legianna. I would love to see it more, but I don't know if we will. We'll have to wait and see. Then we have Odigoren. Odigoren is interesting. This guy is hyper aggressive, can cause bleed, is big as fucking hell, especially when you run into really big ones. And not to mention, it can enrage itself with its, like, rotten meat that it has, making it even tougher to fight. Odigoren really does teach you about being on the move and otherwise, because if you're not moving, if you're not constantly anticipating what they might do and otherwise, you're gonna get wrecked. And Odigoren is basically one of the last few monsters you fight before you start getting to endgame, which is one of my favorite things. Then we're moving on to Raffles, which I don't really have to say much about Raffles because it's fucking Raffles. That red dragon that you see is iconic for a reason, especially if you played Smash Bros. And stuff like that. Raffles is an icon for a reason and is still one of my favorite monsters in the entire series, which I'm pretty sure anybody can agree with me on that one. Then there's Diablos, who is my least favorite monster in the series. I like what Diablos offers. I like what Diablos can do. I don't hate Diablos as a concept. I just hate how unfair and how much damage you could take from you. Like, 1 or 2 hits is all it takes to stun you, and a lot of the time those 1 to 2 hits is all it takes to kill you. Not to mention you can dig underground, pop up above you, which you need to carry a certain item to stop that. And even if you are carrying that certain item, you only have so many of them before you just, like, you pop him up, he goes back down, you pop him up, he goes back down, you pop him up. That's the whole fight in a nutshell, and I fucking hate it. There's a reason Diablos is my least favorite monster in the series. Then we have Kieran. Kieran. This one's polarizing. Kieran is a monster that really depends on who you are. If you like monsters that, like, can deal a lot of damage, that could kill you in 1 hit maybe, that could paralyze you, stun you, but you like the idea of being able to beat down on something this powerful, you'll probably have a lot of fun with Kieran. I don't like fighting Kieran because sometimes you'll do really well with Kieran, other times they'll be like, fuck you. And Jesus Christ, the amount of times this happened when I was fighting Arc-Temper Kieran as well. Oy vey, I don't like fighting Kieran. But at the same time, I don't hate fighting Kieran. It's one of those, like, yeah. Those Zoro Magdaros, though, completely disappointing. When I first saw Zoromagdaros at the very beginning of the game, I was like, oh my god, this is cool, I can't wait to fight this thing. And you don't actually get to fight it. You don't even get to actually kill it, for the most part. You're mostly just dealing damage to parts of its body, and then just making it fuck off. That is so disappointing considering many of the fights that we had in previous games, including earlier Monster Hunters where you got to fight things like Narcarkos, the Katie, I forgot what it was in Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate, but you know what I mean. The Cadius, I think it was called. But that's what I mean. For larger monsters, we got to fight plenty of those, and they were epic fights. So our Magdaros is nothing more than just, you know, stab him with a couple of pins and then make him go away because it hurts too much. That's not a good description. Like, in any kind of way, that is not a good description on how I should be describing this guy. From there, we move on to high rank, and starting in high rank, we've got Dodogama. Don't got much to say. Dodogama looks like a dopey but very cute looking monster. It has an interesting idea behind it, and I also like its gimmick where it can have lava rocks in its mouth, but you can also shoot those lava rocks to destroy him. Inoffensive and very fun monster to fight. Pink Wrathian is nothing more than just a variant of the Wrathian, so there's no reason for me to talk too much about this. Well, sorry, subspecies. The only thing is that it has new attacks, and its poison can be pretty lethal to you because a lot of its attacks go along with it. Then we have fucking Beetlejuice, Basil Goose, B-17 Bomber, whatever the fuck you want to call it. Basil Geese, holy shit, what an addition. A monster that can literally invade any hunt. Like, literally, the moment you hear that, dun 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 dun, you were like, oh, fuck my life. Basil Geese is just one of those monsters that every time you heard him, saw him, or whatever, you were just like, well, my hunt just got a lot fucking more annoying. But it was in a good way, because, Jesus Christ, he was a fun monster to fight, and even then, he can work with you with everything that he does. Like, he can actually deal damage to other monsters, because he's trying to interfere with the fight. What a great monster to add in terms of interference and otherwise. Then we have Levassioff. Kind of the same deal as Gyrototus. Don't really have much to say on it, and don't really have much to add. Instead of mud, it's lava. But he does have some unique attacks, like a lava nuke and stuff like that, and when you cover his body in fire, you'll be able to deal full damage. Basically, the lava on its body hardens, so you have to deal fire to it to unharden it, or at least soften it up, so you can deal full damage. So, weirdly enough, fire weapons are really good for this kind of a fight. Erdogan is a returning monster, same thing with Levassioff, and I don't really have much to say. A lot of what I said about Rattlebond works here, except for the bone armor. But the cool thing is that the fact that you can mine Erdogan's back for materials and otherwise, and not to mention the little things that he knocks off, which are bombs that he can also cause to explode, which can deal damage to not only you, but other monsters around you, makes it a lot of fun. Then we have Azure Raffles, or as many people call him, Unfair Raffles, because Jesus Christ. Unless you have flash pods, this guy's never going to come out of the air, this guy's going to never stop aggressing against you, and this guy's never going to stop spewing fire, charging you, hitting you, and all this shit. It's like, good fucking Christ. I don't like fighting Azure Raffles. It's not too difficult to fight Azure Raffles, but I'd rather just fight regular Raffles because it feels more balanced. Then we have Black Diablos, which... Black Diablos is a fight. If I hated regular Diablos, everything I applied to regular Diablos applies to Black Diablos, except for one thing. Black Diablos has a charge move that instantly stuns you if it hits you, and since after it does that, it's going to immediately follow up and attack you and cart you, yeah, no thank you, fuck you, Black Diablos. And then we have Nergigante. Wow, what a great Elder Dragon to add into the game. Nergigante is such a great Elder Dragon, and the fact that you run into him multiple times, you run into him when you're doing Zoromagdaros the first time, you run into him again when you're getting rid of Zoromagdaros for good, and then you run into him again because he's causing all the Elder Dragons in the area to basically go crazy. So you have to kill him to basically try to bring back quote-unquote peace to the area. Like, Jesus Christ, Nergigante is such a fun fight, and he's aggressive, he has a really fun gimmick behind him with the spines and shit like that. This guy is literally your test. Like, your test to make sure that you're ready to take on what is left of high rank. And he feels like the kind of boss that you want to go up... He feels like the kind of boss that you go up against to really test what you're capable of. Now we move on to monsters like Teostra. Teostra is a returning Elder Dragon. This is technically the first time I fought him because I never got far enough in 3 and 4 to fight a Teostra. Teostra is interesting because it's basically this sort of like lion griffin kind of like design where it could spew fire. It could do a massive nuke attack that could kill you if you aren't careful. Not to mention it's very aggressive. It does these really cool charge checks, and it's designed. Not to mention, the more and more the fight goes on, it'll keep charging itself up with fire to the point that it'll turn into blast particles and shit like that. Teostra is a really fun monster to fight against and a really good returning one. Then we have Kushala de Ora. This one I have mixed feelings on. On one hand, Kushala is a lot of fun, especially since it covers itself in wind and otherwise. But the problem that I have with Kushala de Ora is the same thing I have with Kieran, where sometimes you fight it and it's really easy, and then other times you fight it and it just decides, fuck you, you're not here to have fun. And especially, I don't like Kushala de Ora for one reason. It forces you to have a specific build with wind pressure and stuff like that in order for you to even have a chance at hitting it. Because if you're using melee weapons and you try to hit it when it's up, you'll keep getting blown back. So you need to have wind pressure. Now, I know you can make this argument towards a lot of monsters that you want to build towards it, but I more like monsters that allow you to be universal, a lot more flexible. Kushala de Ora is not one of those monsters. Same thing with Kieran. If you're not using a build that prevents you from dealing from its worst elements, you're going to get screwed. You could say the same thing about Valhazak, but the difference between Valhazak and Kushala de Ora is that Valhazak, there's an easy counter. Nullberries. And even then, Valhazak is a really fun fight and has a really nice design behind it. Looking like an undead dragon and shit like that. That is... I love it. Valhazak is my favorite Elder of World, and I'm so glad. I don't know why people hate this monster so much. Like, seriously. I think Valhazak is a really fun fight. I think Valhazak has a really unique design behind it, and you get some really fucking unique looking weapons by fighting it. Then we move on to the final monster that was in the game, which is, of course, XenoGeva. Wow, what an interesting final Elder Dragon to fight against. Basically, an Elder Dragon that was feeding off the energy of the Elder's Recess, turning it into this sort of like almost alien-looking biological creature, like something that shouldn't exist, but it does. It is such an interesting monster and an interesting design that, honestly, it's always fun to fight, especially its Arc-Tempered version. I had a lot of fun fighting it. But with that said, I think it's a little bit on the easy side. I do think this one's been on the easy side, just very time-consuming when you first fight it. But once you get the hang of it, it becomes like a cakewalk, which that can be said for any monster. But still, good way to end off Monster Hunter World Vanilla. So after that, we move on to post-game content, which is monsters that were added into the post-game. And one of these monsters was, of course, Deviljho. Deviljho was a monster that was introduced in 3 Ultimate, which I remember him because when you do some of the quests in high rank, you run into him. Deviljho is basically what Basil Geese was before Deviljho got put back in. An invader monster that can literally ruin your hunt and make things tougher for you. Because Deviljho eats everything. It'll eat monsters. It'll eat hunters. It'll eat small monsters. It'll eat its own tail. Hell, if it could, it'd probably eat the fucking world. It's why I got the title The World Devourer. Deviljho is like one of those monsters where it's like he's aggressive. He'll eat everything if you give him the chance, but he tires out easily because of his carnivorous nature. And not to mention the dragon element that he can use on you to basically prevent all elemental damage. Jesus Christ, that can seriously screw you up in a long run, especially if you're running a pure elemental build. It was good to see Deviljho come back, especially with all the turf wars it could do, and not to mention grabbing certain monsters and using them like fucking weapons. Just like grab them in the mouth and then just start slamming them around. After that, we have Kolfteroth. Kolfteroth was interesting. It was basically one of Monster Hunter's first raid monsters, where instead of killing it, the idea was breaking the horns. And the idea is that the more and more you fought it, the easier it would get to finally put it down for good, or at least break its horns. And that's something I both like, but also don't like. I like it because it allows you to get very familiar and intimate with the monster, allowing you to understand all of its quirks, what it can do, and otherwise. But I also don't like it because you need a full lobby to do this. This is not a monster you can solo, and that's not something I like. I mostly play these games alone, so having a monster that basically is like, no, fuck you, you can't kill it by yourself, is a big fat no from me. But the weapons that you get from it, which were basically the meta for a while before Iceborne came out, fucking amazing. So I gotta give Kolfteroth that. Then, of course, we had all of the different kind of arc-tempered monsters, which I'm just going to lump them all together. Some were fun, others were bullshit. Some were fun, kind of like Kushala was fun, Teostra was fun, and various... Oh yeah, and I also forgot to mention Lunostra. Lunostra was added in as post-game content, and just to say this right now, I'm not a big fan of Lunostra. It's mostly because of her supernova. Her supernova just covers the entire area and fired at chip damages you. And if you're still in range, you could get knocked away by the shockwave of it all, or you could just get chipped to death, and I don't like that. Combine that with the fact that Lunostra and Teostra actually have a opposite turf war where it's more like bond with each other, and they cause like a mega nova basically. Oh, Lunostra's not a fun monster to fight. I hate fighting Lunostra. Interesting design, love the remixed music, but please don't let me fight it ever again. But yeah, going back to Arc-Tempered, like I said, some were fun, some were bullshit. Nergigante Arc-Tempered was bullshit, but other things like Teostra and stuff like that were fun. And I'm glad to see, I'm glad to see the Arc-Tempereds make another return with the later content. Then, of course, we finally have two of the last updates. Behemoth, which... Wow! A monster from Final Fantasy being added in the Monster Hunter world, and we have to fight it like it's a fucking raid boss. What a way to do that. What a way to make us fight like a monster like it's a raid boss, like from Final Fantasy 14. Hell, it's actually thanks to Behemoth that I played 14. I finally played Final Fantasy 14 with my friend Cole and Dean. So I actually have to thank Behemoth for getting me into Final Fantasy 14. It's a great fight, and it's a lot of fun when you have the right people. But that's the problem. You need to have the right people if you want to make this fight fun, especially with its moves like Ecliptic Meteor and shit like that. But I still think it's alright. Now, Leshen and Ancient Leshen. Leshen is fine. I think Leshen is a fun fight, especially since you do it as Geralt of Rivia. This is when they added the Geralt of Rivia stuff, and I think that's a fun fight. The Ancient Leshen, on the other hand, I think is bullshit. Because if you're not playing in a specific way, you're not dealing enough damage because you only get so much time, and you're not being attentive at all times, this guy will literally kill you like it's nothing. The description of the quest literally says it's supposed to be like Death March, and it's not fun. The only time I killed Ancient Leshen was when I finally got Master Rank gear and went back with my friends to fight it because we weren't dying instantly. Fighting it with high rank stuff is a nightmare, but fighting it with Master Rank stuff kind of makes it bearable. But I have to think about this in terms of high rank, and yeah, Ancient Leshen is bullshit. Regular Leshen, fun. Ancient Leshen, fuck off. And that's really all there is in terms of the content in terms of Monster Hunter World and its post-game. Like I said, I'm going to get into Iceborne later, which will be covering only their monsters and my thoughts on it. But all in all, I think Monster Hunter World had like a solid roster. I wish they had a few more monsters, but I wasn't really asking for too many returning. I wanted more unique monsters. I wanted more new monsters. I didn't want too many returning monsters as content and shit like that. Of course, getting things like Devil Joe, that was nice. Lunostra, it was okay, but I wasn't a big fan of it. And things like the Leshen and the Behemoth were also a lot of fun. But again, I wanted more new monsters, not really old monsters, because I still wanted World to be unique. Now, next time we meet up, we'll be talking about Iceborne. I'll be giving my thoughts on Iceborne, and I'll be talking about some of my favorite and least favorite monsters, as well as what do I think about every monster. Speaking of which, favorite monster in Monster Hunter World is definitely the Anjana. My least favorite is Gyarados. As for Elders, my favorite is definitely Valhazak, and my least favorite is Lunostra. And that's pretty much like the only thing I really need to say in terms of my favorite and least favorites. But yeah, that's all I need to say for now. So yeah, I will see you all for part 2, where I give my thoughts on Iceborne and the Iceborne monsters. God, what have I signed myself up for? And yeah, that's the end of the video. Hope you enjoyed, and let me pose a question for you. Do you have your own thoughts and feelings on World? Do you have your own, like, sort of memories and stuff like that with World? And what are your favorite and least favorite monsters from World? Go ahead and leave your comments down below, and we'll discuss it in the comment section. I'm sorry it's been so long since I've uploaded videos with the move and various other things. Also, goddammit phone. I've been very busy, though I'm going to be trying to get back into the swing of things in any way I can. So, please be patient with me. Though I hope you have a very good new year and all that other stuff. So, yeah. Till next time, I'm Keenan47, aka Wolfkeen. I hope you enjoyed, and until next time, guys, take care.